My name is Sadie Marshall, and at 12 years old, I learned that my life was just a deleted file in my parents' success brand. That Tuesday, my parents announced they were going to Singapore for a month-long global lifestyle summit. They tossed 2 crinkled $20 bills and a matte black titanium card onto our marble kitchen island, told me the smart home OS would babysit me, and stepped into the penthouse elevator without looking back. I didn't know the titanium card was actually a deactivated promotional prop with a $0 limit. I also didn't know that weeks later, when they hosted a massive brand relaunch gala to show off to 60 elite tech investors, a digital forensics team would cut their power and arrest them on live stream. But that's the system crash at the end. Let me tell you how the hack started. From the moment the elevator doors closed behind them, it was a rainy Tuesday, 12 days before the date they had circled on the calendar. I walked into the sleek white kitchen holding a gold-painted trophy I had won at the school science fair. I hoped for a hug, but the room felt as cold as a refrigerator. My mother was standing on a stepladder, meticulously organizing a wall of designer heels for a social media photo shoot. Dad was polishing a high-end camera lens by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his face hidden behind a black microfiber cloth. "Mom, look, I got first place for my robot project," I whispered, my fingers trembling against the plastic base of the trophy. "That's nice, honey, but put it in the garage." "It doesn't match the room's minimalist aesthetic," Mom said, not even turning her head. "Now listen. Your father and I are heading to the Global Lifestyle Summit in Singapore. It's a huge networking event for our consulting brand. You're 12 now, and since our smart home security is top-notch, you're old enough to manage the penthouse." I felt a sharp, hollow chill in my chest. "Who will be here? Is the nanny coming back?" Dad finally looked up, but only to check the lighting on his camera. "Nannies are a distraction, Sadie. We're gifting you extreme independence. Our smart home OS is more reliable than any human sitter, and frankly, it's the future of parenting. We're proving that a Marshall can be self-sufficient from birth." Mom tossed a small velvet jewelry pouch onto the marble kitchen island. Inside were 2 crinkled $20 bills and a shiny matte black titanium card. $40 for any fresh fruit you might want. Use this card for the automated grocery delivery app. Don't call us unless the entire server rack in the basement catches fire, understand? "Can I at least call Aunt Ruby?" I asked, clutching my trophy to my chest. Mom's face turned into a mask of stone. "Ruby is a negative energy person who doesn't support our career vision. She's been blocked on the house network. Just focus on the self-leadership journal we bought you." I watched them go back to their packing, feeling like a ghost in my own home. I didn't know that the titanium card was actually a deactivated promotional sample with a $0 limit. The silence of the penthouse was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I didn't know it was the sound of my life being deleted. Monday arrived with a gray, foggy dawn that made the penthouse feel like it was floating in a cold, lonely cloud. I stood in the hallway, clutching a handmade Safe Travels card I had spent all night drawing with her best markers. Mom was dressed in a sharp, charcoal gray power suit, her hair pulled back into a tight, perfect bun that looked like it hurt. She wasn't pulling a suitcase. A professional courier had already whisked their designer luggage away an hour earlier. "The smart home app is synced to my phone, Sadie," Mom said, tapping her glowing smartwatch impatiently. "I can see if you leave the lights on or forget to set the alarm. Don't make me get a notification while I'm at the summit gala." I stepped forward to hand her the card, but Dad was busy filming a travel vlog intro on his phone. "Going live in 3, 2, what's up, followers? Heading to Singapore for the summit." He pushed past me without a glance, his focus entirely on the tiny camera lens. The elevator chimed with a cold digital ding. They stepped inside, the mirrored doors sliding shut like a guillotine. I didn't watch them from a porch. I pressed my face against the freezing glass of the floor-to-ceiling window, watching their black town car merge into the morning traffic 45 stories below until it was just a speck. That first night, the smart home felt less like a protector and more like a jailer. I tried to open the balcony door for some fresh air, but a voice from the ceiling chirped. "Access denied. Night security lock engaged for unaccompanied minors." My parents hadn't just left me, they had programmed me into a corner. I sat on the edge of the giant white leather sofa, my small body swallowed by the expensive furniture. I found a digital sticky note on the smart fridge that simply read, "Inventory the pantry, practice your brand building." I didn't sleep. I just watched the blinking red eye of the security camera in the corner of the ceiling, wondering if her parents were actually watching her or just making sure the furniture was safe. Tuesday morning, the sun hit the white marble floors so brightly it made my head ache. I walked to the massive touchscreen smart fridge, my stomach feeling like it was eating itself, a hollow burning pit that made my ribs ache every time I breathed. When the door opened, there were no eggs or milk. Instead, I found 3 individual packets of organic seaweed snacks and a single bottle of expensive sparkling water. A bright red subscription expired alert flashed on the fridge's screen, locking the fresh keep drawers where the real food was usually kept. I realized then that my parents had stopped the grocery subscription to save on overhead while they were away. I opened the self-leadership journal her mother had left. Tucked inside were the 2 $20 bills. $40 for 40 days. That's only $1 a day, I whispered, my voice echoing in the hollow kitchen. I felt a trickle of cold sweat down my back. I grabbed the matte black titanium card and ran to the building's Smart Hub delivery kiosk in the hallway. I tried to order a simple sandwich, swiping the card with trembling fingers. The screen didn't just say declined, it flashed a bright yellow warning, non-transactional item, promotional gift sample. She turned the card over and saw a tiny prop-only sticker hidden under a hologram. It wasn't a real credit card at all, it was a piece of decorative plastic from a luxury gift bag. Desperate, she tried to message her parents' professional success brand page on her iPad, since their personal phones were on Do Not Disturb. An automated chatbot replied instantly, "We are currently elevating our brand in Singapore. For business inquiries, contact our assistant." I was blocked by a robot. I sat on the freezing marble floor, clutching the 2 $20 bills that felt like a cruel joke in such a gold-plated room. Her parents were on a live-streamed luxury and success panel 45 stories below her heart, and she was starving in a penthouse that didn't even have a loaf of bread. Wednesday morning, day 3. I sneaked out through the building's service entrance because the main lobby was filled with cameras and guards I was too terrified to face. I walked 10 blocks past the glowing jewelry stores, until I found a cramped, dim corner bodega that smelled of old cardboard and floor cleaner. I pulled my gold science fair trophy out of my backpack and placed it on the sticky counter, her heart thumping against her ribs. "Please, sir," she whispered to the shopkeeper, "could I trade this for a bag of rice? It's real gold paint." The man didn't even look up from his small, flickering TV. "Is this a prank?" he asked, looking around the ceiling for a hidden camera. "You're that Marshall kid from the Abundance vlogs. I know this bit. You're doing a social experiment on the poor, right? Get out before I call the cops for trespassing." I stood frozen as he laughed at my hunger, thinking my desperation was just content. I tucked the trophy back into my bag, my face burning with a hot, itchy shame. I pulled out her first $20 bill, which was damp from her sweaty palm. She searched the bottom shelves and found a large transparent bag of generic puffed rice cereal and a single bruised apple. The total was $6.25. On her way out, she noticed a free sample tray outside a nearby juice bar. It was empty except for a few stray sunflower seeds. She carefully picked them up and wrapped them in a tissue like they were precious diamonds. Back in the vast, silent penthouse, she didn't have ramen. She spread the puffed rice across the marble island and counted out exactly 20 pieces for her lunch. She downloaded a water tracker app on her iPad and set an alarm to beep every 15 minutes. "If I drink 2 cups of lukewarm water for every piece of cereal, my stomach won't know it's empty," she told herself. The luxury around me felt like a poison. I was surrounded by millions of dollars of art, but I was living on seeds and tap water. Day 5 arrived with a bitter artificial chill. The central climate control was locked at a freezing 50 degrees to preserve the expensive artwork while the parents were away. The air conditioning didn't just preserve the art, it turned my breath into tiny ghosts that reminded me I was still alive, even if no one cared. I was huddled in the corner of the sofa, wearing 3 layers of thin designer t-shirts that didn't help at all. Her fingers were blue and stiff as she tried to bypass the security firewall on the iPad to reach her parents. Instead of a phone call, Sadie found they were hosting a Global Abundance Live webinar on their public channel. She clicked the link, her heart racing like a trapped bird. On the screen, her parents sat in a gold-trimmed lounge in Singapore, glowing under professional ring lights. "We have a question from the chat," Mom chirped, her smile fixed and shiny like a porcelain doll. "Someone is asking about family balance. Listen, followers, true leaders don't let personal drama interrupt their harvest. We've taught our daughter to be a self-sustaining powerhouse." I tried to type "I'm freezing and there is no food" into the live chat. She hit send, but a bright red error message popped up. Comment blocked by moderator, violating community positivity standards. Her own mother had set a bot to delete anything that wasn't a compliment. She watched as her father clinked a glass of sparkling juice with a famous entrepreneur. "No excuses," he said to the camera. "If you're hungry for success, you don't complain about the crumbs." At that moment, the lights flickered and a flickering blue hologram appeared in the kitchen. It was Mrs. Jordan, the AI sitter. "Good evening, Sadie," the bot said with a hollow pre-recorded warmth. "According to your biometrics, you are feeling stressed. Please perform 10 deep breaths to optimize your family harmony." The bot didn't have hands to feed me, just a script to silence me. I dragged a heavy decorative fur throw from the master bedroom to the kitchen floor. She sat there, curled into a ball next to the server rack because it was the only thing in the house that gave off a tiny bit of warmth. She opened the camera app. She didn't just record a video. She created a hidden vault folder on the cloud drive and titled it, The Unfiltered Brand. "Today is day 5, she whispered, holding the iPad with shaking hands. She pointed the lens at the digital thermostat, showing 50 degrees, then at the empty seaweed packets in the trash. "My parents told 50,000 people that I am a self-sustaining powerhouse. But really, I'm just a kid who is shivering. If you're watching this, don't believe the filters." On day 7, the massive floor-to-ceiling windows were covered in a thick, ghostly condensation. I was huddled near the server rack again, her skin the color of pale, translucent parchment. A sharp, rhythmic buzzing echoed from the wall-mounted intercom. It wasn't a guest or a delivery. It was Mr. Harvey, the building's retired night concierge. He was a stooped man with silver hair who lived in a tiny windowless unit in the basement. He stood at the door holding a weathered leather tool bag. "Utility alert, Sadie," he said through the speaker, his voice raspy and deep like shifting gravel. "The building's mainframe shows your unit is pulling zero power in the kitchen, but the server is running at max heat. I'm here to inspect the circuit breakers." I opened the door, her legs feeling like they were made of dry, brittle straw. "Mr. Harvey stepped in, his keen eyes immediately scanning her small, shaking frame instead of the walls. He didn't ask if she was okay. He unzipped his tool bag and pulled out a heavy, steaming stainless steel thermos. "The ventilation sensors told me the air was too cold in here for a human," he whispered, unscrewing the lid with a practiced twist. The smell of rich, salty beef stew and soft carrots hit me like a physical blow. She gasped, her stomach cramping so hard she had to clutch the doorframe. "Sit," he commanded gently, gesturing toward a decorative glass pedestal. I drank the stew directly from the lid, her hands trembling so much that a few drops spilled onto her thin designer shirt. "Listen to me, kid," Harvey whispered. "I used to have a friend who worked as your mom's digital editor. Name was Leo. He quit because he couldn't stand the fakes. He told me that half of your childhood photos, the ones of those perfect Sunday dinners, were just you photoshopped into stock images of fancy tables. You were never even in the room. They've been deleting you from your own life for years." The revelation felt like a second hollow pit opening in my soul. I wasn't just hungry, I was a fabrication. "Your parents are at that abundance summit, aren't they?" Harvey asked, leaning heavily on his mahogany cane. "I've seen their live-streamed highlights on the lobby monitor. They look well-fed." I lowered the thermos, a smear of brown broth on her pale lip. "They said I'm a self-sustaining powerhouse." Harvey's face crumpled into deep, angry lines. "They're using the building's vacation economy mode to save on the electric bill while they're gone. They remotely shut off your kitchen appliances from an app, kid." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small, battered digital voice recorder. "I won't call the authorities yet because I know you're scared of their reputation managers suing you," he said. "But every time the hunger hurts or the lights go out, you record it. Data is the only language people like them understand. I'll smuggle a warm meal through the service lift every night at midnight." He left as quietly as a shadow, leaving the scent of real food to battle the smell of expensive artificial room spray. By the start of week 2, my high-tech private academy, the Crystal Tower, began its global innovation summer term. Her parents had enrolled her months ago, not for her education, but because the school provided elite child management from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It was the perfect way to keep her out of sight while they built their empire. I arrived in a self-driving shuttle, her designer school uniform hanging off her frame like a loose sail. She had used a thick velvet headband to hide her greasy, unwashed hair because the smart shower in the penthouse had locked its temperature luxury setting, making the water too cold to stand. In the advanced VR learning lab, the class was assigned a virtual history simulation. As Sadie pulled the VR headset over her eyes, it felt as heavy as a lead diving helmet. Suddenly, her view screen flashed a bright, humiliating red. A digital voice announced to the whole room, "Account restricted, supplementary enrichment fee, unpaid. Sadie, Mrs. Prescott, her instructor, called out through the classroom's surround sound speaker system. Your parents haven't authorized the digital curriculum payment. Is there a glitch in your family's financial portal? The room erupted in whispers. My classmates, kids of billionaires, looked at me like I was a broken piece of hardware. I wasn't a person to them, I was a subscription error. I tried to stand, but the fluorescent lights above began to flicker and spin like strobe lights. The sterile, cedar-scented air of the lab felt too thin to breathe. She collapsed against a haptic feedback chair, her world turning into grainy digital static. When she woke up, she was in the nurse's biohealth suite. Nurse Hamilton was looking at a tablet that was synced to my school ID. She didn't just use a scale, she scanned Sadie's arm with a glowing biometric sensor. Your blood glucose levels are in the critical zone, Sadie, the nurse said, her voice clinical and sharp. The school's health alert system sent a notification to your parents' primary hub 10 minutes ago. They marked it as spam. I felt a cold lump of lead in her throat. She reached into her sock and squeezed the tiny digital voice recorder Mr. Harvey had given her. She hit record under the blanket. Who is managing your meal prep at home? Nurse Hamilton asked, handing her a small silver packet of emergency glucose gel. I tore it open with her teeth and swallowed it in one desperate gulp. I'm optimizing my independence, I whispered, using her mother's favorite word. Mrs. Prescott, who was standing by the door, tightened her grip on her digital clipboard. Optimization doesn't include a 7-pound weight drop in 7 days, Sadie. She looked at the nurse. I'm opening a student welfare incident report in the school's legal database. I'm not just watching a student, I'm witnessing a system failure. For years I was a ghost, now I was finally a medical emergency, and I was going to make it count. It was midnight in the dark penthouse, but the sun was blazing in Singapore when the 3D hologram projector in the living room buzzed to life. I was shivering inside a crinkly silver emergency blanket Mr. Harvey had found for her. Her mother appeared in the center of the room, wearing a gold leaf face mask and a silk robe. She looked less like a mom and more like a glowing, angry statue. Sadie, do you have any idea what you've done to our algorithm health score? Mom's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers. The school's report flagged our wellness brand as high risk. Our engagement is down 7% because of your fainting drama. Mom, I'm sick, Sadie whispered, her voice echoing in the empty, hollow room. I haven't had a real meal in 4 days. Stop being a glitch in the narrative, Mom snapped, adjusting her mask in a small handheld mirror. You have the independence protocol. You have the titanium card. If you're hungry, it's because you're failing to manifest your own resources. We're trying to vibe with the desert energy here, and you're cluttering my notifications with your weakness. In the background of the projection, I could see a delivery drone hovering near their hotel balcony, dropping off a tray of exotic fruits and oxygen cocktails for her father. He was reclined on a massage table, eyes closed with cucumber slices over them. He didn't even flicker an eyelid at the sound of his daughter's shaking voice. If you say one more word to those teachers, Mom's hologram leaned in, her eyes turning into cold digital slits. I will initiate a digital erasure. I'll wipe your cloud ID, delete your school history, and reset your smart home access to guest. You will literally have no identity in this house. Do you understand? I felt a jolt of pure electric terror. My parents weren't just threatening to send me away, they were threatening to delete my life. But then I saw a small rec icon in the corner of the hologram. My parents weren't just talking to me, they were recording this. Later, I would find out they were selling the behind-the-scenes footage of my extreme independence to a private reality TV subscription group for $500 a head. My hunger was their exclusive content. I reached into a hollowed-out Master Your Brand book on the table and secretly clicked the button on Mr. Harvey's voice recorder. I'm just a piece of content to you, aren't I? I asked, her voice suddenly going flat and hard. You're a brand representative, Mom corrected, dismissing the call with a cold flick of her wrist. The hologram vanished into a cloud of blue sparks. I sat in the total darkness, the silence of the penthouse feeling like a heavy, suffocating weight. She hugged the success book to her chest, knowing the recorded threat was the only thing that could prove she was real. By day 18, the penthouse had become a digital cage. I didn't just record my face. She became a forensic investigator of her own life. She sat at the sleek black glass desk in the study, her thin fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. Day 18, she whispered into her voice command smartwatch. She opened the building's resident portal and downloaded the guest access logs. The entry list for Unit 4501 was as empty as a digital desert. No Mrs. Jordan, no emergency sitter, just the cold timestamp of her parents' departure 45 floors below. Next, she accessed the smart home power distribution map. She took a high-resolution screenshot showing that the master bedroom had full energy to preserve the art collection, while the kitchen and pantry had been remotely toggled off from an IP address located in Singapore. It was black and white proof of a deliberate, calculated choice. She didn't just keep a written journal, she created an encrypted burn folder on the building's secure cloud server. Inside, she saved data exports from her school-issued health app. The graphs showed famine spikes and extended low-energy states that matched the exact dates her parents were posting photos of 7-course meals. On day 20, Mr. Harvey met her at the trash compactor chute on the service floor. "I can't smuggle much more than protein bars through the heat sensors, Sadie," he whispered, his tired eyes darting toward the blinking overhead security camera. "The building management is starting to track the service lift usage at midnight." "I have the power logs, Mr. Harvey," I said, her voice sounding like crackling dry paper. "I have the access data. They can't say I'm glitching when the data says I'm fading away." Harvey gripped the cold metal handle of the trash chute. "Then we upload the entire folder to the principal's encrypted tip line tonight. If I do this, I might lose my job and my pension, but I won't have to live with a ghost on my conscience." I nodded, her eyes burning with a cold, sharp focus. She was no longer just a hungry child anymore. She was a technician building a digital fortress. The morning after the data upload, day 21, the Crystal Tower didn't just make a phone call. They triggered a level red wellness breach in the state's secure database. Mrs. Prescott and the principal sat in a high-tech crisis room, surrounded by glowing monitors displaying Sadie's burn folder data. Every graph and timestamp was metadata verified, proving the files hadn't been tampered with. The principal placed an encrypted emergency call to the parents' hotel in Singapore. Instead of a sweet motherly voice, she was met by the parents' global image management team, a group of stone-faced lawyers who appeared on a split screen. "This is an unauthorized intrusion into our client's private lifestyle data," the lead lawyer barked. "Whatever evidence you have is clearly a sophisticated AI deepfake generated by a disgruntled child." "Sir," the principal said, her voice as sharp as a diamond-tipped drill, "the IP address that cut the power to the kitchen belongs to your client's primary device. We aren't asking for an explanation, we are initiating a mandatory state audit." In Singapore, the mask of success finally cracked. Behind the lawyers, Mom was visible pacing by a shimmering turquoise pool, her gold leaf mask half peeled off, revealing a face twisted with a very human, raw panic. She wasn't worried about me. She was frantically checking a brand sentiment tracker on her phone as her luxury partnership contracts began to blink red with warning signs. By noon, a senior digital forensics caseworker named Kara Olson was assigned. She didn't just look at a file. She ran the guest access logs through a 2FA two-factor authentication verifier. When Mom tried to lie and say a digital concierge service had been visiting Sadie daily, the system instantly flagged the lie. There were no biometric entries, no facial recognition pings, and no heat signature matches for any adult in 3 weeks. Kara issued an emergency legal override, a digital key that stripped the parents of their remote control rights to the penthouse. For the first time in 20 days, Sadie sat on her floor and watched as the subscription-expired lights on the fridge turned from red to a steady, hopeful green. The state hadn't just opened a case, they had hacked me back into existence. Late that evening, on day 22, I was sitting on the quilted leather floor mat in her bedroom. The penthouse was quiet, but the air felt charged with digital tension. Suddenly, the Family Pulse app on her iPad emitted a piercing, high-pitched alarm she had never heard before. A video threat notification from her mother popped up. It wasn't a polished hologram this time, it was a grainy, frantic recording sent from a dark service hallway in Singapore. Mom's hair was unraveling from its perfect bun and she was whispering like a cornered animal. "Sadie, you listen to me," Mom hissed, her eyes darting around the dark screen. "I've already prepared a reputation shield package with our legal bots. If you don't tell the school that your data logs were just a coding prank you played for attention, I will upload a shadow log showing you've been accessing restricted sites. I'll make sure every high school admissions AI flags you as a security risk. No one will ever grant you a scholarship or a future. You'll be digitally blacklisted before you're 13. I felt a heavy lead-like weight in her chest. Before she could breathe, a soft thud hit the balcony glass. A luxury delivery drone was hovering outside, dropping a gourmet apology crate filled with imported Swiss chocolates and gold-wrapped snacks. It was a calculated bribe to confuse her, a way to make her feel guilty for betraying the family brand. I looked at the glittering chocolates and then at my iPad. Instead of crying, she initiated a screen recording of the video threat, her fingers moving with a cold, robotic precision. "You're just trying to patch a leak in your marketing, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "But the entire system has already crashed." She paused, looking at the blinking red recording light. "If you're wondering why I didn't just alert the lobby guards on day one," she thought, "it's because in this house I was taught that the server admin is always right. I thought the user agreement meant I had to stay silent to be loved. I thought love was just a premium setting I hadn't unlocked yet." She clicked save and synced the file to her hidden vault. She was no longer waiting for a reboot. She was the one hitting the delete button. On the evening of day 22, the penthouse entrance didn't buzz. Instead, the heavy, reinforced steel door slid open with a deep, authoritative hum. Kara Olsen didn't wait to be let in. She was accompanied by Officer Miller, a seasoned cop whose face looked like it was carved from granite. He used a government master key fob that bypassed the parents' security protocols. Sadie was found sitting in a tech nest she had built in the center of the living room, a circle of silver emergency blankets surrounded by her iPad, the voice recorder, and the success book. Kara wasn't wearing a blazer. She wore a dark blue tactical vest with the words Digital Forensic Division printed in silver. Her eyes weren't just kind, they were sharp and observant, moving like a scanner over the empty, cold room. Officer Miller looked at the empty seaweed packets and the silver blankets. "I've seen drug dens with more humanity than this gold-plated tomb," he grunted, his voice tight with suppressed anger. She didn't ask to see the kitchen. She pulled out a handheld thermal imaging scanner. The screen showed the entire penthouse was a freezing deep purple, except for the tiny orange glow of warmth coming from Sadie's body and the server rack. "I'm Kara, your state-appointed administrator," she said, her voice calm and steady like a soft blue light. She immediately walked to the ceiling corner and placed a physical privacy shield over the blinking security camera. "I've disconnected your parents' live feed. They can no longer watch you like a piece of inventory." Sadie didn't show her a single video. She swiped her hand toward the living room's projection wall, displaying the burn folder she had built. "I have the power distribution map, the guest access logs, and the screen recording of the blackmail video," Sadie said, her voice sounding stronger, like a machine finally finding its rhythm. Kara looked at the gourmet apology crate still sitting on the balcony floor, unopened. She took a digital photo of the Swiss chocolates next to the thermal readings of the empty fridge. "They tried to bribe the data," Kara whispered, shaking her head. Kara reached into her pack and handed Sadie a physical, old-fashioned chocolate bar wrapped in simple red paper. It wasn't gourmet, but it was real. "Sadie, I've updated the house permissions. I am now the lead user, and you are no longer a brand representative." She leaned in close, the scent of vanilla and old paper replacing the smell of artificial room spray. "Do you want to log off from this life and find a real home?" For the first time, Sadie didn't look at her iPad for an answer. She looked at Kara and said, "I want to be deleted from their brand forever." The next morning, Kara brought me down to a mobile forensic command center parked at the curb. A sleek black van filled with wall-to-wall monitors and humming processors. Inside, the air smelled like ozone and fresh coffee. Kara sat Sadie in a swivel chair made of mesh and chrome and handed her a glowing glass tablet. "We didn't just call your mother," Kara said, her voice sounding sharp and rhythmic like a keyboard. "We issued a system-wide financial subpoena. We've unlocked the back end of your parents' global success business account." On the screen, a dynamic spending map bloomed into life. It wasn't just a list of numbers. It was a vibrant web of gold and red icons. Kara tapped an icon in Singapore. "While you were counting 20 pieces of puffed rice, your parents spent $64,320 on brand expansion activities." I watched as the icons flashed. $6,500 for a private oxygen yoga session, $18,000 for a success gala table, and $2,800 for a single gold-dusted dessert. Every transaction was labeled as a tax-deductible business expense. "We also ran a shadow lobby scan using the building's facial recognition," Kara continued, scrolling through a series of empty hallway photos. "Your mother claimed a premium AI concierge bot was visiting you daily. But the system logs show that Mrs. Jordan is just a fake avatar she created to trick the building's welfare sensors. No one, not a human, not a bot, ever entered your unit." The most painful part appeared at the bottom of the screen. Kara opened the security lock override logs. It showed the exact second the titanium card was switched to demo mode. "They didn't just give you a broken card," Kara whispered, her face reflected in the dark glass of the monitor. They used their admin app to remotely disable the transaction chip 3 minutes after they got into the elevator. It was a calculated digital lockout. I stared at the cold, hard binary proof. Her hunger wasn't an accident or a glitch. It was a line of code written by her own mother. I wasn't a child to them, Sadie said, her voice as steady and cold as the air in the van. I was just an overhead cost they decided to cut. Late that night, I sat in Mr. Harvey's small basement unit. It was a tiny, windowless room that smelled of motor oil and peppermint tea. It was a sharp contrast to the gold-plated penthouse upstairs. Her voice command smartwatch suddenly vibrated with a Priority 1 family override. Mom's face appeared as a glitchy, vibrating projection on the cinder block wall. Sadie, log into the master account and delete the burn folder immediately, Mom hissed. Her voice was strained and full of digital static. The state audit has frozen our travel funds. We're stuck in the Singapore airport and it's destroying our brand's abundance rating. You're corrupting the entire family server. I'm not a server, Mom, Sadie said, her voice echoing against the concrete pipes. I'm a human being who didn't have power to cook an egg. You're being a negative disruptor, Mom snapped, her face flickering with green pixels. I gave you a titanium card and a luxury penthouse. Most kids would pay for that kind of extreme independence experience. Tell the investigators you accidentally toggled the kitchen power off yourself. Say it was a user error. I felt a cold, hard spark of courage in my chest. She tapped a command on her smartwatch. I'm initiating a total family unsubscribe, Mom. Wait, what are you doing? Mom's voice hit a high, panicked note. I'm deleting my profile from the Marshall Success Brand app, Sadie whispered. She swiped her finger across the watch screen. I'm removing my name from your family growth metrics. From now on, your engagement data will show that you have 0 children. In the background of the call, Sadie heard the loud, robotic voice of a Singapore airport security officer asking her mother to step aside. Mom's eyes widened with a raw, ugly fear. Sadie, don't you dare! If you delete your cloud ID, you'll lose your access to the trust fund. You'll be a basic user with nothing. I'd rather be a basic user with a sandwich than a premium representative who is starving, Sadie said. She clicked a final button that broadcasted her mother's screaming voice onto the building's lobby monitors, where the neighbors were currently watching the parents' success highlight reel. The entire building could now hear the brand crumbling. You didn't just forget me, Mom, Sadie said, her voice as steady as a heartbeat. You remotely uninstalled me from your life. Now I'm running a different operating system. She hit the end call button, and the glitchy projection vanished, leaving only the quiet, warm safety of the basement. On day 25, the air in Mr. Harvey's basement was thick with the scent of motor oil and rain tapping rhythmically against the high, narrow windows. I sat on a scarred wooden workbench, her feet swinging over a pile of stripped copper wires and old motherboard parts. She was swallowed by a thick, oversized wool sweater Harvey had found in a storage trunk, making her look even smaller against the cold, gray cinder block walls. Kara arrived, not with a paper folder, but with a ruggedized legal tablet that hummed with a low, pulsating blue light. She sat on a squeaky metal stool, her expression as serious as a total server crash. Sadie, I've just received a security alert from our international division in Singapore, Kara said, swiping her screen to project a tabloid headline onto the wall. Your parents aren't just coming back to apologize. They've signed a deal to sell the exclusive story of their wrongful investigation to a global streaming network. They are trying to monetize their own betrayal and turn your hunger into a viral marketing stunt. I gripped a warm ceramic mug of hot cocoa Harvey had made me. The heat felt miraculous against her palms, but her heart felt like a block of ice. They're still treating my life like a plot twist for their followers, she whispered, her voice hollow but steady. Not for long, Kara replied, checking the sync status on her tactical watch. The state has upgraded the charges to aggravated digital abandonment and cyber neglect. It's a Category 5 felony. But here is the catch. They've rebranded their welcome home party into a brand relaunch gala. They've invited 60 of the city's top tech investors and lifestyle influencers. Kara leaned in, the blue light from her tablet reflecting in her observant eyes. We aren't going to stop the gala, Sadie. We're going to let them go live on their success channel. We want the entire network to see the system shutdown happen in real time. I've installed a panic link on your smartwatch. If they even touch you or try to force access your cloud ID to delete the burn folder, you hit this red icon. I looked at the tiny glowing icon on my wrist. She felt like a firewall that had finally held after a month-long hack. What if they try to act like we're a perfect family for the cameras? They will, Kara said, her jaw tightening. They'll offer you glow-up smoothies and pretend you were at a luxury camp, but undercover officers will be mixed in with the catering staff. Every fake smile will be recorded by our own sensors. Tomorrow, the Marshall brand doesn't just fail, it gets deleted. I nodded, her eyes burning with a cold, sharp focus. She was no longer a victim waiting for a reboot. She was the trap. At 5 p.m., electronic ambient music began to pulse through the walls of the penthouse, making the floorboards vibrate like a nervous heartbeat. From Mr. Harvey's basement unit, I watched the building's guest check-in tablet, which she had secretly synced to her smartwatch. She saw the names of 60 high-profile tech investors and lifestyle influencers popping up like digital targets. Upstairs, the penthouse didn't have a simple banner. Instead, a massive holographic display hovered in the center of the room, reading, "The Abundance ERA, Reclaiming the Marshall Brand." Mom was wearing a bioluminescent silk dress that glowed with a soft blue light, supposedly changing color based on the real-time likes the event was receiving on her live stream. However, the dress was currently flickering a frantic, shaky orange, revealing her internal panic. Before the first guest arrived, Mom stood in front of the hallway mirror, splashing cold water on her face and whispering, "I am the brand, I am success," over and over like a broken prayer. She didn't notice a small smudge of waterproof mascara under her left eye, a tiny crack in her perfect mask. When the door chimes rang, she snapped into her influencer smile, which looked as sharp and dangerous as a shard of glass. The 360-degree immersive projections turned the living room into a shimmering Singapore desert at sunset. Guests moved through the artificial dunes, holding glowing NFT drink tokens and sipping abundance cocktails that hissed with liquid nitrogen smoke. When an investor asked where the self-sustaining powerhouse was, Mom laughed, a sound like dry autumn leaves. "Sadie is currently in a digital fast in her sleep pod to enhance her neural focus," she lied, her fingers twitching at the hem of her glowing dress. I watched through the building's internal security network, feeling like a ghost watching a movie of her own life. She saw undercover officers disguised as catering staff, carrying trays of zero-calorie microbites, and wearing hidden earpieces. The elevator's digital floor counter turned a deep, warning red as it ascended. The brand relaunch hologram glitched for a split second, showing a flash of static. I held my breath, her finger hovering over the panic link on her wrist, waiting for the system to finally crash. The gala was at its peak of artificial perfection. Mom stood on the shimmering Singapore sand projection, her glowing dress now a pulsing neon violet as she raised a platinum-rimmed glass for the Global Abundance live stream. "Success isn't just about wealth," she beamed into the hovering camera drones. "It's about the legacy of independence we leave for the next generation." Downstairs, Sadie's finger hovered over the panic link on her watch. Her heart wasn't just racing, it felt like a glitching motor. She looked at the picture of her science fair trophy one last time before she slammed her thumb onto the red icon. Suddenly, the pulsing music in the penthouse was cut by a deafening, digital screech. The abundance holograms flickered and died, replaced by the harsh, industrial white light of the emergency backup system. The bioluminescent dress on Mom's body instantly turned a flat, dead charcoal black as the state override froze the family's linked accounts. Kara and 4 officers, including Officer Miller, who led the charge, stepped out from the catering kitchen, dropping their trays of microbites. "Deanna and Grant Marshall," Miller's voice boomed, cutting through the silence like a gunshot. "We are executing a digital and physical asset seizure." The hovering drones didn't stop filming. Instead, Sadie's burn folder took over the live stream feed. Across the projection walls and on the screens of millions of online followers, the truth played out in high definition. They saw the thermal scan of the freezing living room. They heard the recording of Mom's blackmail threat. They saw the IP log showing the kitchen power being cut from Singapore. The guests backed away as if the parents were a computer virus. Mom scrambled toward her gold-plated smartphone, her hands shaking so hard she dropped it into a liquid nitrogen cocktail. "This is a technical error," she shrieked, her voice cracking with a raw, desperate sob. "I'm still the lead user." Dad didn't even try to help her. He bolted toward the art preservation vault in the back hallway, trying to hide behind the expensive paintings, but the officers used the thermal vision sensors to find him instantly. He was dragged out past his guests, his face pale and sweating. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Mom looked at the projection wall where my 12-year-old face was speaking. "I'm not a glitch, Mom," the video played. "I'm the evidence." The room full of influencers and investors stood in total, Icy silence. They weren't just watching a scandal, they were watching a brand being deleted from existence. The walk of shame didn't happen on a quiet suburban street. It happened in the sterile, glass-walled lobby of the penthouse tower under the harsh blue glare of 20 security monitors. Diana and Grant were led out by the tactical officers, their hands bound behind them with heavy, black polymer zip ties. Diana's bioluminescent dress had lost all its light and was now just a dull gray rag that looked cheap and wrinkled under the lobby's fluorescent lights. Grant's expensive leather shoes made a pathetic, rhythmic squeak on the polished marble floors, a sound that echoed like a dying machine. Outside, the digital spectators had gathered. These weren't just neighbors on porches. They were dozens of people holding up their own smartphones, live streaming the downfall of the Marshall Success brand to their own followers. Instead of waving or whispering, they stood in a hate-watching huddle, their faces lit by the glow of their screens. I watched the whole thing from the security booth, her pale face reflected in the main monitor alongside her parents' digital profiles. As the officers reached the revolving door, Kara tapped a final command on her tablet, initiating a system-wide status revoke. On the giant screen above the concierge desk, the parents' photos suddenly flipped from a gold owner token's premium status to a flashing red access revoked, blacklisted. Diana stopped for a second, looking down at the shattered remains of her gold-plated smartphone, which had fallen and cracked on the sidewalk. She didn't look back at the house or for me. She frantically looked for a camera lens to apologize to, her lips moving in a silent, desperate performance for a crowd that no longer believed her. The police transport van wasn't just a vehicle, it was a cage of digital silence. As the doors slammed shut, a signal jammer on the van's roof hummed, cutting the building's Wi-Fi signal for a split second. I didn't say she could breathe. She looked at the empty signal bar on the monitor and whispered, "The signal is finally gone, Mr." Harvey walked into the booth and handed me a heavy, old-fashioned brass key. It wasn't digital, and it didn't need a battery. "This is for my unit," he said. "It's a real place, not a profile." I took the cold, heavy metal and squeezed it, realizing that the Marshall brand hadn't just been arrested, it had been uninstalled. The day after the Marshall brand crashed, I was sitting in a state transition facility. The room was small and white, smelling of lemon floor wax and industrial printer ink. I was staring at a blank digital screen, her mind feeling like a hard drive that had been wiped clean. Suddenly, the heavy plastic door swished open. A woman stepped in, and she looked like a real-world glitch in the sterile room. She was wearing a rugged canvas jacket with dark soil stains on the sleeves and smelled faintly of pine needles. This was Aunt Ruby. She wasn't an influencer. She was a sustainable botanist who spent her days in the dirt, not on a screen. "Sadie," Ruby said, her voice low and warm like a wool blanket. She didn't reach for an iPad. Instead, she placed a small, heavy terracotta pot on the table. Inside was a real green sprout poking out of dark, damp earth. "What is that?" I whispered, her voice sounding tiny in the echoey room. "It's a snapdragon," Ruby replied. "It doesn't need a Wi-Fi signal to grow, it just needs care." She gently covered the glowing tablet on the table with her hand, pushing it aside. "Mrs. Prescott found my number in a legacy file, a real piece of paper in the back of a metal cabinet. Your mother deleted me from the cloud 5 years ago because I refused to be a sub-brand for her company." Ruby pulled out a physical Polaroid photo and slid it across the table. It showed a wild, messy backyard with a wooden porch and a big oak tree. "I don't have a follower count, Sadie," Ruby said with a small smile, "but I have a spare bedroom that faces the sun." I reached out and touched the cool, damp dirt in the pot. It felt heavy and honest. For the first time, she didn't feel like a data point. She felt like something that could finally put down roots. Kara walked in with a physical clipboard and stamped a paper document with a loud, satisfying thud. The guardianship wasn't just a digital update, it was a physical promise. 2 weeks after the arrest, the sun was breaking through a thick layer of gray clouds, casting long, warm rectangles across the floor of Ruby's cedar-scented sunroom. I sat at a clunky, scratched wooden table that didn't have a single touchscreen. Instead of an iPad, she was looking at a thick stack of paper documents Kara had dropped off, the official asset liquidation notice. The Marshall Success brand logo was centered on the top page, but it was covered by a massive ink-stained red stamp that simply said void. Kara had explained that the legal fallout was total. The parents hadn't just been charged with neglect. The state had uncovered a brand insurance fraud scheme. They had tried to claim their travel funds were stolen by digital kidnappers, to explain why they couldn't send Sadie money. The entire penthouse and every piece of designer furniture was being auctioned off to pay for the state's investigation and Sadie's future care. The state-issued laptop on the table chimed. It wasn't a sleek hologram call. It was a restricted access video bridge, monitored by a prison official. I gripped a heavy ceramic mug of peppermint tea, her hands as steady as a stone. She clicked accept. Mom appeared on the screen, but she was unrecognizable. Her hair was matted, her skin was sallow, and she was wearing a coarse gray state-issued jumpsuit that made her look small and fragile. She wasn't in Singapore. She was in a concrete-walled visiting room that smelled of bleach. "Sadie, listen," Mom whispered, her voice cracking like dry leaves. "The lawyers say we can rebrand this as a communication breakdown. If you sign a retraction of the burn folder logs, we can get the house back. We can restart the server, Sadie. We can fix the brand." I looked at the mute icon on the screen. For 12 years, her mother had controlled the volume of her life. Now my finger hovered over the button. "I'm not a subdirectory in your brand, Mom," I said, her voice sounding deep and resonant in the quiet sunroom. "The user agreement was a lie. You didn't just miss a payment. You calculated that my survival was less important than your engagement metrics. You're destroying our legacy," Mom shrieked, her face contorting into an ugly pixelated mask of rage. "No," I replied, her eyes reflecting the green leaves of the plants around her. "I'm just permanently unsubscribing." She clicked the terminate session button with a firm, decisive click. The screen went black. I didn't look for a notification or a like. She stepped away from the computer and walked into the garden, the smell of damp earth and blooming snapdragons filling her lungs. The Marshall brand was a dead link, and for the first time, Sadie was offline and truly alive. 5 months later, the intense heat of summer had faded into a crisp, golden autumn. I sat on a hand-carved wooden bench in Ruby's backyard, the scent of ripening apples and wood smoke filling the air. She wasn't hiding at home. She was connected to a high-security legal portal, via a laptop that had a small, jagged crack in the corner. A real, imperfect tool for a real life. On the screen, the courtroom looked cold and sharp, filled with the hum of high-end air conditioning. Her parents didn't look like success icons anymore. They sat behind a plain oak table, their expensive suits now looking baggy and out of style. The judge, a woman with a voice like a heavy brass bell, didn't just read a sentence. She issued a permanent parental termination and brand liquidation order. "You didn't just neglect a child," the judge's voice echoed through the laptop speakers. "You commodified her survival. You used her hunger to sell a narrative of independence." The judge raised a heavy physical wooden gavel and slammed it down with a thunderous crack that made my laptop vibrate on the garden table. "By the power of this court," the judge announced, "the Marshall Success brand is legally dissolved. Furthermore, Diane and Grant Marshall are sentenced to 5 years of digital probation. For the duration of their sentence, they are legally barred from all social media platforms, brand consulting, and public-facing internet activities. They are effectively uninstalled from the world they used to neglect their daughter." I watched as my father finally broke. He didn't shriek like Mom. He slowly put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with a quiet, heavy sob that didn't have a single filter on it. It was the first real thing she had ever seen him do. Kara arrived at the garden gate an hour later, carrying a small, dented metal hard drive. "It's not a letter, Sadie," Kara said, sitting beside her on the bench. "It's a digital black box. It contains all the unfiltered, unedited photos of you from the last 12 years, the ones they never posted because they weren't perfect enough." I looked at the cold metal drive. She didn't put it in a drawer for years. She held it against her heart, feeling the physical weight of her own history. "They didn't just lose the case," I whispered, looking up at the tall oak tree. "They lost the password to my life." Kara stamped the final paper with a red ink seal, and the sound felt like a door locking for the last time. I closed the laptop lid, cutting the digital connection to that world forever. She was no longer a pending case. She was a permanent resident of the real world. Life with Aunt Ruby didn't happen in an apartment. It happened in a weathered, cedar-shingled cottage tucked at the edge of a wild forest. There were no surveillance cameras or smart locks. Instead of a cold marble kitchen, the house was filled with the scent of dried lavender and fresh-baked sourdough bread. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Sadie and Ruby were in the glass-walled greenhouse, the sound of raindrops drum-rolling against the roof. "You have to press the seeds deep into the soil," Ruby said, her hands covered in dark, rich mud. I hesitated, staring at my clean, pale fingers. She was still used to worrying about her image and staying camera-ready. But then, she plunged her hands into the dirt, feeling the grit under her fingernails and the cool dampness of the earth. It was the first time she had ever been allowed to be messy. Suddenly, a crack of thunder boomed, and the power flickered and died. The house went pitch black. My breath caught in her throat, and she scrambled back, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. In the penthouse, darkness meant her parents had cut the power as a punishment. She waited for the cold and the hunger to return, but instead, she heard the soft, rhythmic strike of a real match. A tiny, warm orange flame bloomed in the dark. Ruby was lighting a thick beeswax candle. "It's just a storm, Sadie," Ruby said, her voice as steady as a heartbeat. She didn't check an app or a status log. She wrapped a thick hand-knitted wool blanket around Sadie's shoulders and led her to the fireplace, where a real wood fire was crackling. I thought I was being uninstalled again," I whispered, clutching the blanket. Ruby sat beside her, handing her a mug of warm apple cider. "In this house, you aren't a profile that can be deleted. You're a person, and the lights coming back on isn't a premium feature." Later that night, Sadie sat at the scratched wooden desk in her room. It didn't have a holographic projector, but it had a physical jar of colorful sea glass she had collected with Ruby. She opened her old iPad and went to her parents' Marshall Success Archive. With a slow, deliberate breath, she clicked Delete Account and Wipe All Data. She didn't feel like she was losing her history. She felt like she was clearing the cache for a brand new life. She turned off the device and watched the screen go dark, realizing that real family didn't need a screen to see her. 5 months after the sentencing, the morning air was crisp and smelled of rain-soaked pine. I didn't sit at a kitchen table. She walked with Ruby into the local community credit union, a small, sturdy brick building that felt like it had been standing for 100 years. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting scent of old paper and blue ink, a world away from the sterile digital clouds of her parents' penthouse. They met with a pro bono financial auditor named Mr. Henderson, a kind man with thick glasses that made his eyes look huge and curious. He didn't show Sadie a hologram. He laid out a physical ledger with her parents' names crossed out in thick, permanent red ink. "Sadie," Mr. Henderson said, his voice soft and gravelly, "we found something during the corporate bankruptcy of the Marshall brand. Your parents hadn't just ignored you. They had used your digital likeness and your future college fund as collateral for market expansion loans." I felt a sharp, cold prick of realization. She hadn't just been a ghost in their house, she had been a line of credit. "They pawned my future for more followers," she whispered, her fingers tracing the red lines on the ledger. "They tried," Ruby said, placing a warm hand on Sadie's shoulder. "But because the fund was locked in a blockchain-secured trust, they couldn't actually spend the principal. They were only draining the interest to pay for those oxygen cocktails in Singapore." Mr. Henderson handed Sadie a heavy physical bank passbook. "The court has issued a release of interest order. Every cent has been recovered and moved into a biometric locked trust that only you can touch when you turn 19. I looked at the numbers in the little book. It wasn't just currency to her, it was fuel for a new engine. She looked at Ruby, then back at Mr. Henderson. "I want to take a small portion of the recovered interest," Sadie said, her voice sounding solid and sure. "I want to start a digital safety fund for kids who are being used as brand content. I want to help them buy their own legacy files, so they have evidence before they disappear." Ruby smiled, a tear catching the light in her eye. "That sounds like a real-world investment, Sadie." As the teller stamped the final document with a loud metallic thunk, Sadie realized that the Marshalls hadn't just lost their daughter, they had lost their last piece of collateral. She was no longer a debt to be paid, she was a girl with her own capital. By the time I turned 14, her world was no longer defined by a glowing screen. It was defined by the smell of damp clay and the gritty feeling of wet soil between her fingers. She sat in the sunny, wood-paneled office of Dr. Reeves, which felt more like a treehouse perched in the pines than a sterile clinic. Dr. Reeves wasn't just a therapist, she was a trauma architect who helped Sadie rebuild the walls her parents had systematically torn down. On the table between them sat the boundary box, a heavy, charcoal-gray ceramic chest Sadie had shaped by hand. It was filled with smooth, heavy river stones, each one representing a part of her life that was no longer public content. "Today is the 2-year anniversary of the Marshall brand shutdown," Dr. Reeves said, her voice as soft and steady as falling snow. "How does the internal firewall feel today?" It's strong, I whispered, tracing a jagged crack she had intentionally left in the ceramic lid. But they keep trying to brute force the password to my life. Just that morning, a security breach alert had flashed on her state-issued laptop. Her parents hadn't sent a regular letter. They had used an AI generation tool to create a deepfake profile that looked like a 14-year-old girl named Jade. The bot had messaged her with hyper-specific private memories, the exact smell of the penthouse jasmine perfume and the musical pitch of the elevator chime, trying to trick her into an emotional system unlock. It was a calculated psychological hack designed to make her feel guilty. I felt a cold, sharp panic in my lungs when I saw the message. I admitted, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the heaviest river stone. I almost believed the AI was a real person for a split second. That's the legacy bug, Doctor, Reeves explained, handing her a small piece of rough burlap to polish the stones. They want to use your nostalgia as a backdoor entrance to control you again. But you have the primary admin rights now. Later that week, a formal restorative justice request arrived from her parents' new high-priced legal team in California. They wanted a mediated video session to harmonize the family energy for a new documentary they were filming. It was another marketing move disguised as healing. Sadie didn't just say no. She recorded her heart rate spike on her watch as she read the request and sent the biometric data to Kara as evidence of harassment. "This is not harmony," I wrote in her official reply. "This is a denial of service attack on my peace." She placed the final stone, labeled self-ownership, into the box and clicked the heavy metal latch shut with a resounding clack. The sound was loud and physical, an echo of the door she had finally locked in her mind. She wasn't punishing them. She was just protecting her human operating system from a virus that refused to be uninstalled. It was a golden September afternoon, and Sadie was in the sun-drenched attic of Ruby's cottage, packing a rugged waterproof trunk for her first semester at a remote forest research station. She wasn't just going to a regular university. She was heading into the deep, unmapped wilderness to study the roots of ancient trees. Near the attic door sat a small, weathered metal case that had been left anonymously at the garden gate that morning. There was no postmark, just a sticky note with her old brand ID written in faded purple ink. Instead of paper letters, the case contained a heavy-duty encrypted hard drive and a physical script book. I plugged the drive into her own field laptop, her movements precise and clinical. The first file wasn't a heartfelt apology. It was labeled leaked PR prep footage from 8 years ago. It showed her mother sitting in a dimly lit lawyer's office, practicing her remorseful mother monologue with a high-priced image consultant. "No, Diana," the consultant's voice barked on the screen. "You have to tilt your head 3 degrees to the left to look vulnerable. Mention your own mother's abandonment. It tests well with the redemption demographic." I watched her mother adjust her expression like a screen filter, trying to perfect the sad look she would later use in the letters she sent. It wasn't a confession. It was a carefully rehearsed marketing campaign. The second file was a legal deposition from her father. He wasn't crying. He was arguing with a lawyer about the copyright ownership of Sadie's science fair trophy. "That trophy is intellectual property of the Marshall brand," he snapped in the grainy video. "We should be monetizing her resilience arc for a streaming deal." I didn't feel the sting of old wounds. She felt like a scientist examining a dead specimen. She picked up the physical script book and saw the handwritten notes in the margins, notes about emotional keywords and targeted forgiveness. She didn't tuck the memories away in a drawer to cry over. She initiated a deep-level format on the hard drive. She watched the progress bar climb slowly to 100% as every pixel of their performance was wiped out. "I'm recycling the hardware," she whispered to the quiet attic. She began uploading her new ancient route mapping research onto the clean drive. She was using the very tool they used to lie to her to document the truth of the forest. "Are you ready, kiddo?" Ruby called from the porch, the sound of the truck engine idling in the driveway. I latched the metal case, now filled with her own scientific tools, and smiled. "The hardware is finally being put to good use," she said. She didn't leave a message or wait for a sign. She walked down the stairs, leaving the Marshall brand behind as nothing more than an empty, formatted disk. I arrived at the high-altitude research station just as the first frost was turning the pine needles into shimmering silver spikes. She didn't have a designer suitcase. She had a rugged hiking pack that smelled of canvas, rain, and adventure. She climbed to the top of a jagged granite ridge, the wind biting her cheeks with a coldness that felt honest and sharp, unlike the artificial, sterile chill of the penthouse. She looked down at the valley of ancient oaks, their roots anchored deep into the dark, heavy heart of the earth. She remembered the 12-year-old girl who had been a ghost in a 45-story cage. She remembered the flicker of the titanium card and the lonely silence of a locked refrigerator. But then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. A final notification from a legacy search engine popped up on the screen. Marshall Success Brand, 0 results found. It wasn't a glitch, it was the total erasure of the lie. She deleted the notification and then dragged the Family Pulse app into the trash bin, watching it vanish with a quiet digital poof. She was no longer waiting for a signal from Singapore. She was her own signal. I pulled out her old dented iPad, the same one that had recorded her hunger 8 years ago. She didn't use it to film a brand. She pointed the lens at a tiny green seedling she had just planted in a protected crevice of the mountain. "Today is day 1, she whispered, her voice clear and resonant in the vast, open mountain air. "The root system is strong. The environment is real. The brand is finally dead." She wrote a physical postcard to Aunt Ruby, a real piece of thick cardstock with a hand-drawn map of her camp. It didn't need a like, a share, or a filter. It just needed to be held by a hand that truly cared. Someone called her name from the research cabin, a fellow scientist named Miles, who was carrying a heavy tray of physical, leather-bound books. "Coming!" Sadie shouted. She didn't check her camera angle or a lighting filter before she turned. She walked toward her future, her boots leaving deep, messy prints in the real mountain soil. I had spent a 40-day month starving for a family that didn't exist, but I had spent 8 years building a woman who finally did. The user agreement was over. The real world had finally launched. People ask me sometimes, if you could go back, would you have just kept quiet to keep the luxury? The answer is always the same. No, I don't regret the hidden data logs. I don't regret the thermal scans, the recorded blackmail, or the night the tactical officers walked into my parents' glowing artificial gala. I don't regret standing in that freezing room and refusing to be a glitch in their narrative. The only thing I regret is that I had to wait until I was starving to realize I wasn't just a prop. I deserved a real life. If you're listening to this and you recognize something, if you grew up as a background character for someone else's image, if your parents cared more about their followers than your feelings, if you learned to shrink yourself to fit their algorithm, I want you to know, saving your own data is not a betrayal. Logging out of a toxic family is not cruelty. You are allowed to protect your peace, even from the people who were supposed to be your primary caretakers. My parents left me with $40, a fake titanium card, and an AI that locked the fridge. They thought I would be too programmed, too compliant, too desperate for their premium love to ever hit record. They were wrong. I survived that month. I compiled the evidence. I let the data speak for itself. And when the system finally crashed, when they stood in their own penthouse, surrounded by their elite guests, watching their perfect digital empire get deleted, that wasn't revenge. It was just reality catching up to the timeline. Family isn't about shared cloud storage or follower counts. It's about who shows up offline. Mr. Harvey showed up. Kara showed up. Aunt Ruby showed up. The people who truly love you will never ask you to starve to keep their brand looking perfect. My parents left me with a prop card and a freezing room, but I walked away with something they could never buy. The truth, my admin rights, and a reality that belongs only to me. And that is the only upgrade I'll ever need. Thank you for logging in and staying until the end. If my story reached you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family's feed, if you've ever wondered whether you had the right to hit the delete button on their control, I hope you know now. You do. You always did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss stories like this. Check the description for the next video. Another story about truth, breaking the algorithm, and finding your way out.